I stood outside the old brick building with my hand resting on the cold metal handle of the front door. My heart felt heavier than it had in years. The afternoon sun warmed my shoulders, but it could not quiet the thoughts racing through my mind. I had driven almost 2 hours to get there, and now that I had finally arrived, I wanted nothing more than to climb back into my car and disappear. Some places hold memories so powerful that even after decades they can make your knees feel weak. This was one of those places. My name is Daniel. I am 68 years old, and for most of my life I believed that moving forward meant never looking back. That belief had carried me through a divorce, the loss of friendships, and years of lonely holidays. It also left me standing alone more often than I wanted to admit. My daughter Emily had been asking me for months to attend the community reunion with her. She said it would do me good. She smiled every time she asked, as if she already knew something I did not. I told her no more times than I could count, but that morning something changed. Maybe it was the quiet house, maybe it was seeing another birthday come and go with only a few phone calls, or maybe I was simply tired of carrying old regrets like a backpack full of stones. I took one slow breath and opened the door. The smell of fresh coffee and baked cookies drifted through the room. Folding chairs filled the large hall. Families laughed together. Old friends hugged as though no time had passed at all. I suddenly felt like a stranger who had wandered into someone else's celebration. Emily spotted me almost immediately. She hurried across the room and wrapped her arms around me. Her smile reminded me so much of her mother that it still caught me off guard. Even after all these years, I knew you would come, she said softly. I almost didn't. I admitted. She looked at me with gentle eyes. Then I am glad you changed your mind. I nodded, but inside I wondered if I had made a mistake. Across the room, familiar faces blurred together. Some had grown older, some walked with canes, others carried grandchildren on their hips. I recognized more people than I expected, yet I could not bring myself to walk over and speak to anyone.
Across the room, familiar faces.
Time has a strange way of making distance feel permanent, even when everyone is standing only a few feet away. Then someone called my name, Daniel. The voice stopped me cold. I turned slowly and saw Michael standing near the coffee table. His hair had turned completely white and his shoulders had rounded with age, but I knew him instantly. We had once been inseparable best friends through high school, business partners for nearly 15 years, until one painful argument ended everything. Neither of us had spoken since. For a long moment neither one of us moved. The room seemed quieter, even though conversations continued all around us. My chest tightened as memories flooded back, memories I had spent years trying to bury. I almost turned and walked away again, but something in Michael's face made me stay. He gave a small smile that looked uncertain. It's been a long time, he said. It has. I answered. Neither of us knew what to say next. Emily gently squeezed my arm before stepping away. She seemed to understand that this conversation belonged to us alone. Michael picked up 2 cups of coffee and handed one to me. I wasn't sure you'd come today, he admitted. Neither was I. We both laughed quietly. The laughter felt awkward at first, but strangely comforting. For several minutes we talked about ordinary things, our children, our health, retirement, the weather. It felt like walking across thin ice, every word careful, every silence carrying years of unfinished history. Then Michael looked down at his coffee. I've wanted to apologize for a very long time. His words caught me completely by surprise. For years I had imagined this moment. If it ever happened, I always believed I would be the one demanding answers. Instead, there he was carrying his own burden. Before I could respond, another announcement echoed across the hall, inviting everyone to gather for a group photograph. Families began moving toward the front of the room. Michael looked at me. Would you mind standing beside me? I hesitated. A few years earlier I would have refused without thinking. Now I wasn't so sure. Something inside me whispered that life had already taken enough from both of us. Maybe pride had cost more than either of us realized. I nodded. Sure. As we walked toward the crowd I noticed old classmates smiling at us. Some looked surprised, others looked relieved, as though they had secretly hoped this day would come. We stood shoulder to shoulder while the photographer adjusted the camera. Just before the picture was taken, Michael quietly said something I never expected to hear. There was something you never knew about what happened back then. I turned toward him, but the bright camera flash filled the room before he could explain.
That life had already taken enough from both of us. Maybe pride had cost more than either of us realized. I nodded. Sure. As we walked toward the crowd I noticed old classmates smiling at us. Some looked surprised, others looked relieved, as though they had secretly hoped this day would come. We stood shoulder to shoulder while the photographer adjusted the camera. Just before the picture was taken, Michael quietly said something I never expected to hear. There was something you never knew about what happened back then. I turned toward him, but the bright camera flash filled the room before he could explain. The moment passed almost instantly. People clapped, children laughed, chairs scraped across the floor, as everyone returned to their conversations. I looked at Michael, but he had already been pulled away by another group eager to greet him. His unfinished sentence stayed with me. There was something you never knew. Those words echoed in my thoughts as I watched him across the room speaking with people who had remained part of his life, while I had drifted farther and farther away from everyone who once mattered. For the first time in years I realized my memories might not tell the whole story. I held my untouched cup of coffee and wondered whether the truth I had carried for 3 decades had been built on only half the facts. Standing there among familiar faces, I understood that walking through the front door had only been the beginning of something I never expected to face. For the rest of the afternoon I could not stop thinking about what Michael had said. Every conversation faded into the background, every smile around me seemed distant, my eyes kept drifting across the room searching for him. Whenever I caught sight of him, someone else was talking with him. And the opportunity slipped away once again. Emily noticed my distracted expression. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the whole building," she said. "Maybe I am," I answered. She smiled gently. "Whatever happened years ago doesn't have to decide today." Her words stayed with me. After she walked away, I realized my daughter had spent years watching me protect old wounds that never truly healed. Perhaps she had understood long before I did that forgiveness often begins long before anyone says the word sorry. Eventually the crowd began spreading out into smaller groups. Some people wandered into the garden behind the building while others sat around long tables sharing memories. I finally spotted Michael standing alone near an old oak tree outside. I carried my coffee toward him before I could change my mind. He looked up as I approached. "I wasn't sure you'd come over," he admitted. "Neither was I." For a moment we simply stood there listening to the wind moving through the branches. Then I looked directly at him. "Back inside you said there was something I never knew." He took a slow breath and rubbed his hands together. "I did." His voice sounded heavier now. "I should have told you 30 years ago. Instead I let you believe something that wasn't true, because I thought it would protect everyone." I felt my heartbeat quicken. "Protect who?" "You, your family and mine." I stared at him waiting. He looked toward the ground before speaking again. "The business didn't fall apart because you made a bad decision." I frowned. "What are you talking about? It was already failing before that." "I didn't tell you because I had borrowed money without saying anything. I thought I could fix everything before you ever found out. Instead I made things worse." The words landed harder than I expected. For decades I had blamed myself for the collapse of the company. We had argued one terrible afternoon, accusations were thrown, pride took over. We walked away from each other believing the friendship was finished. "You're saying it wasn't my fault." "Not the way you believed. I made mistakes, Daniel, big ones. I should have trusted you enough to tell you the truth. Instead I let you carry the blame, because admitting my own failures scared me." Neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt completely different now. It no longer carried anger. It carried regret. I leaned against the wooden fence and closed my eyes for a moment. "Do you know how many nights I replayed that day?" He nodded slowly. "Probably as many as I did." A small laugh escaped both of us. Not because anything was funny. Because after so many years we finally understood how much unnecessary pain we had shared. Before either of us could continue, an older woman walked toward us with careful steps. "Daniel." I turned in surprise. Margaret. She had been our office manager all those years ago. Time had added silver to her hair, but her warm smile remained exactly the same. "I haven't seen both of you together since before my youngest grandson was born," she said. "That tells you how long it's been." She looked from one of us to the other. "I'm glad you're talking again. Life is too short to keep carrying yesterday." Her words felt simple yet deeply true. She reached into her handbag and carefully removed a faded photograph. "I found this while cleaning out some boxes last month. Thought one of you might want it." She handed it to me. The picture showed Michael and me standing outside our first tiny office. We looked young, hopeful, and completely certain that nothing could ever separate us. I smiled despite myself. "I remember this day. We had just signed our first contract," Michael said. "And celebrated with the worst pizza in town," I added. Margaret laughed. "You two thought it tasted like success." When she walked away, neither of us said anything for several seconds. I kept staring at the old photograph. "Funny, isn't it?" I finally said. "One picture can remind you of the person before life became complicated." Michael nodded. "Maybe that person never disappeared. Maybe we just forgot how to find him." His answer stayed with me. As the afternoon slowly turned toward evening, families began gathering for dinner. Volunteers placed homemade dishes across long tables, filling the room with familiar, comforting smells. Emily waved me over to sit beside her. Michael hesitated before taking the empty chair across from me. The meal began with easy conversation. Children laughed, grandparents shared stories, everyone seemed grateful simply to be together. Watching those families, I suddenly realized how much time I had spent alone after my divorce. Not because no one cared. Because I had quietly built walls around myself. Walls I convinced myself were protecting me. In truth, they were keeping everyone out. Emily reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Dad." "For what?" "For staying." I looked around the room. She was right. Years ago, I would have left the moment things became uncomfortable. Today I stayed long enough to hear the truth. Long enough to discover that regret often grows from misunderstanding rather than reality. As people began clearing the tables, Michael leaned toward me. "There's one more thing I need to tell you. Something even more important than the business." I looked at him. His expression had changed again. This time it wasn't regret I saw. It was concern. I realized whatever he was about to say had nothing to do with the past. And everything to do with someone we both loved. I looked at Michael and waited. He folded his hands together before speaking. "It's about your brother Thomas." The moment I heard his name, my heart sank. Thomas and I had barely spoken during the last 10 years. We never had one dramatic fight. Instead, life slowly placed distance between us. Different cities, different priorities, missed birthdays, unreturned phone calls, until one day silence became normal. "I thought this reunion was only about the past," I said quietly. "So did I," Michael replied. "Then Thomas called me last month." I stared at him. "He called you?" Michael nodded. "He said he wanted to come today, but he wasn't sure you would want to see him. He asked me not to tell you unless the moment felt right." I looked around the room, almost expecting my brother to appear. "Is he here?" Michael smiled softly. "He was afraid you might leave before speaking with me. So he's been waiting outside." I stood without saying a word. Every emotion I had buried over the years seemed to rise all at once. Michael gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "Go talk to him. You've both waited long enough." I walked toward the front entrance with slow, uncertain steps. The evening air felt cooler now. As I stepped outside, I saw a familiar figure sitting on a wooden bench beneath the same old maple tree, where our father used to wait for us after school. Thomas looked older than I remembered. His shoulders had become thinner. His hair had turned almost completely gray. But when he looked up, I saw the same brother who used to race bicycles with me through quiet neighborhood streets. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then he stood. "I wasn't sure you'd come outside," he said. I almost didn't. We both smiled. Not because everything was suddenly fixed. Because we both understood how difficult this moment had been. Thomas slowly walked closer. "I owe you an apology." I shook my head. "Seems everyone is apologizing today." He gave a quiet laugh. "Maybe we all waited too long." We sat together on the bench. The silence between brothers felt different from any other silence. It carried shared childhood memories that words could never fully explain. Thomas looked toward the sunset. "After Mom passed away, I didn't know how to reach you. You buried yourself in work. I buried myself in my own family. Every year it became harder to make the first phone call." I nodded slowly. "I thought you didn't need me anymore." He turned toward me. "Daniel, I always needed my brother." Those words broke something inside me that had remained locked away for years. I realized both of us had spent a decade believing the very same lie, that the other had chosen distance, when in truth neither of us knew how to cross it. Without thinking, I reached over and hugged him. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect. It was simply honest. When we pulled apart, both of us were smiling through grateful eyes. We walked back inside together. Emily looked up from across the room and covered her mouth with surprise before hurrying toward us. She hugged both of us at once. "I knew this day could happen," she said. "You had more faith than we did," Thomas answered. The evening slowly became something I never expected. Families gathered for one last photograph. This time Michael stood on one side of me and Thomas stood on the other. The photographer smiled. "Everybody ready?" I looked at the people beside me. Years earlier, I would have believed that some broken relationships could never be repaired. Now I understood that healing rarely begins with perfect words. It begins when someone finds the courage to stay instead of walking away. The camera flashed. This time I didn't think about old mistakes. I thought about new memories. As people began saying their goodbyes, Michael handed me the faded photograph Margaret had found earlier. "Keep it," he said. "But write today's date on the back. Someday your grandchildren will ask why this picture matters. Tell them the truth. Tell them that pride can steal years, but kindness can give them back." I slipped the photograph into my jacket pocket. "I'll tell them. And I'll tell them something else." "What's that?" "That it's never too late to open the right door." On the drive home, Emily followed behind me in her own car. For the first time in many years, my house no longer felt like a place I returned to alone. It felt like the beginning of a life I had almost missed because I was afraid of one difficult conversation. That night I placed the old photograph beside a brand new one from the reunion. One showed two young friends full of dreams. The other showed family and friendship restored after years of silence. Neither picture was perfect, but together they told the story of a life that finally found peace. I smiled as I turned off the light, knowing that some of the most meaningful journeys do not begin with a long road. Sometimes they begin with the simple courage to open one door instead of turning around. The end.